0% biological relation. Let that sink in. A single, brutal scientific fact just detonated inside the most powerful political dynasty in America, shattering a legacy built on lies and exposing a truth so shocking, it will redefine everything you thought you knew about power, blood, and deception. For nearly 2 decades, a carefully constructed illusion protected the heir to an empire, a young man paraded as the future, the very embodiment of a name synonymous with untouchable power. But in a sealed congressional hearing, behind doors meant to keep secrets, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett didn't just question Barron Trump's lineage, she obliterated it with a truth that echoed louder than any gavel, a truth that ripped through the carefully woven fabric of his identity. This wasn't just a hearing, it was a reckoning, a demolition of a carefully crafted myth, a moment where the very foundation of a family's claim to power crumbled under the weight of undeniable evidence. The silence that followed that revelation was deafening, a collective gasp from a room full of the nation's most powerful, as they watched an entire narrative collapse in real time. And the fallout? It's just beginning. The world is about to learn the true cost of a lie. If you believe the truth needs to be heard, if you're ready to see how a single, courageous voice can bring down an empire of deceit, then smash that like button and subscribe right now, because you are about to witness the implosion of a dynasty, piece by brutal, undeniable piece. You won't want to miss a second of this. The room was sealed like a vault. No media, no murmurs, no oxygen for lies. Just raw power, palpable tension, and 2 names facing off under oath in a confidential session of the United States House of Representatives Ethics Committee. The plaque on the door warned, no leaks, no noise, no spin. Inside, a polished mahogany table split the chamber like a fault line. On one side sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, spine straight, dossier closed but locked and loaded like a weapon. She's known for her surgical precision, her unwavering calm, and a voice like granite wrapped in silk. She came to expose, to verify, to shatter illusions. Across from her, in a custom-cut navy suit, an expression that screamed pure, unadulterated entitlement, sat Barron Trump. Chin high, eyes sharp, ego sharper. He was the self-proclaimed heir, the one who publicly declared, "I am the only one with the blood and the vision to carry the Trump legacy forward." There is no substitute for blood. This wasn't just a hearing. It was a battlefield over one thing, the review of identity and legal eligibility to inherit political brand assets. In plain English, is Barron really who he says he is? Or is the Trump name, the very foundation of his power, built on a buried lie? Crockett, a relentless truth seeker, was there to verify biology, not debate politics. Barron, the arrogant scion, was about to learn that some claims, especially those based on blood, can't withstand the brutal light of truth. This was a clash of titans, a fearless truth-teller against an entitled heir, and the stakes couldn't be higher for the future of a political empire. The gavel slammed down, signaling the start of the battle. The chairman wasted no time, bringing up Barron's public declaration just 48 hours prior, a video playing in crisp, brutal HD. "I am the only one with the blood and the vision to carry the Trump legacy forward. There is no substitute for blood." The screen went black, and the silence was deafening. Then, with a quiet power that belied the storm brewing, Jasmine Crockett slowly rose. "Mr. Trump has made a claim to inheritance based on blood," she stated, her voice cutting through the tension. "So today, we're not debating politics. We're verifying biology." Barron scoffed, a loud, dismissive sound that echoed through the chamber. He leaned forward, voice oozing contempt, his eyes locked on Jasmine. "Let's be honest," he sneered, "this isn't about blood. This is about resentment. You've spent your whole career trying to claw your way up by dragging my family down. You don't have a legacy. You don't have a name. You sure as hell don't have Trump blood." He didn't stop there. His voice sharpened, turning from cold to cruel, dripping with venom. "This entire circus is just a bitter little performance by a bitter little woman. Black, angry, and desperate to stain a name she'll never be part of." The room imploded in stunned silence. Even the stenographer paused, the air thick with shock. Then, bam! The chairman's gavel slammed like thunder, a desperate attempt to regain control. "Mr. Trump," he snapped, his voice laced with fury, "that language is not only unacceptable, it is reprehensible. Personal attacks based on race, class, or gender will be struck from the record and met with sanction." Barron sat back, nostrils flared, but said nothing more. But the damage was done. Jasmine, however, didn't flinch, didn't even raise her voice. She stared straight at him, her voice like granite wrapped in silk, utterly unshakable. "I don't need to trade insults, Mr. Trump," she said, her words a quiet, devastating blow, "because the truth is already walking up the aisle." She sat down, hands folded, calm as a quiet storm, a predator waiting for its moment. The temperature in the hearing room hadn't dropped, but something far colder had entered. Barron's earlier insults still pulsed beneath the skin of every listener, a slow-burning fuse of arrogance and ignorance. Yet Jasmine Crockett, ever composed, didn't rise to meet it with outrage. She didn't need to. Her silence had already spoken volumes. What came next wasn't fury. It was strategy. And it began not with accusation, but with paper. And in that room, sealed from cameras, guarded from noise, every single person knew the real war had just begun. If you thought Barron's arrogance was off the charts, wait until you see what Crockett pulled out next. Hit that like button if you're ready for the truth to be exposed. With a steady breath, Jasmine Crockett unfolded the first document, a seemingly innocuous piece of paper, Barron's New York birth certificate. She read it aloud, line by line, with surgical precision: name, date, hospital, father, Donald John Trump. "Looks official, looks clean." She paused, her voice a quiet, chilling whisper, "but let's not pretend paper can't lie." Her index finger landed not on the name, but on a string of numbers few in the room would have noticed: registration ID New York 206320. "This isn't just an internal reference," she explained, her voice gaining a quiet power. "This is a global birth record index tag specific to institutions that report births to both domestic and international archives, usually when there's a foreign national parent or expected dual citizenship." Then came the first bombshell, delivered with devastating calm: this exact global code New York 2006 also appears in a second birth record filed in Ljubljana, Slovenia. Same day, different name, different father. A crack of unease, a ripple of disbelief, ran through the room. Even the legal aides shifted in their seats. Barron, still arrogant, a thin mocking grin tugging at his mouth, scoffed, "This is what you brought? A ghost story based on some bureaucratic coincidence?" But Jasmine didn't flinch. She then unveiled the second document, older, slightly yellowed, visibly foreign: Boris Morozdelino, born March 20, 2006, Ljubljana General Hospital. Father, Morozdelino. And the code? Identical. This is not a translation error. This is not a clerical mistake. This is a duplication of identity, intentional, methodical, and possibly orchestrated at the highest levels. Barron's mask cracked. His chair screeched backward as he stood up, veins in his neck tight, jaw clenched. His hand slammed the wooden table so hard it sent a tremor down the microphones. "Where the hell did you dig up that draft certificate from? Some country where everyone sings when they talk?" he barked, voice laced with venom, his accent sharper than usual. Jasmine's expression didn't change. She simply spoke cool and clear, every syllable dropping with the finality of a gavel: "I dug it from the very place you were born." But she wasn't done. She then presented a notarized declaration signed by Melania Canoyus, dated March 28, 2006, just 8 days after birth. "I accept the change of name and nationality of my son for the purposes of political security and family protection." This was consent for identity reformation, ratified at both hospital and diplomatic levels. The room was stunned, several committee members leaning in, mouths slightly open. Barron's face contorted, not into fear, but something far older and uglier: contempt. "Fake paper, fake ink. You think that gives you value?" he sneered. The chairman warned him again, but Jasmine's stillness became sharper. "I dug it up from the very place you were born," she repeated, cutting deeper than any insult. Melania hadn't just changed her son's name, she had changed his country, his legacy, and possibly his legal existence. Barron may have owned towers, but he no longer owned the narrative. Jasmine did. And all she needed was a thumbprint. The air thickened, calcified. Then, the ultimate blow. Jasmine held up a white envelope with a black seal, independent genetic verification, GI certified. Her voice dropped into something even sharper than volume. What I'm about to present is not political. It is scientific. It is anatomical. It cannot be voted on, spun, or wished away. She flipped the document. Sample 1, a hair follicle extracted from Mr. Barron Trump's grooming kit. Sample 2, a buccal swab from Miroslav Delano. Then, the pin drop into silence, genetic match, 98.97%. The room held its breath. Then, the final, devastating bullet point, comparison with Donald J. Trump, former President of the United States, who is publicly listed as Barron Trump's father. 0% biological relation. The silence fractured, not into chaos, but into the tremble of institutional fear. This wasn't just a revelation. It was an undoing. Barron jolted upward like a coil snapping loose. His chair fell backward with a metal clatter, ignored. His body was shaking, not with grief, but with something worse, rage laced with exposure. You're destroying the legacy of an entire family just to save your own faded name, he hissed, slamming the table. You won't bring me down with DNA. But Jasmine didn't move. Not a blink, not a smirk, not a twitch of satisfaction. She waited until his voice hung dry in the room, until all that remained of his fury was the echo of failure. Then she spoke, quiet, anchored like a verdict rendered in stone. No, I'm not bringing you down. The DNA already buried the lie. That was the moment it died. Not the myth, but the defense of it. Because there is no response to that kind of truth. Then, the final nail in the coffin, the Trump Organization Inheritance Charter of 1997. Jasmine opened it slowly, carefully, as if touching something sacred and volatile. This, she began, her voice slicing through the tension, is the 1997 Charter of Succession and Inheritance from the Trump Organization. Article War, Section A. It states, and I quote, only individuals whose direct bloodline to Donald J. Trump has been verified through certified genetic analysis shall be eligible to inherit leadership roles or controlling interest in Trump Organization assets, trusts, or subsidiaries. She closed the binder for emphasis. No assumptions, no oral claims, no press conferences, only certified genetic proof. Then, without breaking cadence, she raised her gaze. And we have just presented a court-iffy DNA report confirming that Mr. Barron Trump shares 0% biological relation with Donald J. Trump. There it was. The bombshell nobody could twist. It wasn't speculative. It wasn't partisan. It was structural. A bloodline clause written by the very empire Barron hoped to inherit had just shut the door on him with the same precision and brutality that Trump himself once wielded against his competitors. Jasmine took one slow step forward, the charter still in her hand, and let her next words fall like a sword across a royal seal. If you are Barron, then you cannot be a Trump. If you are a Trump, then you were never lawfully born. Gasps were audible, but no one dared speak. The line wasn't just sharp, it was surgical. It cleaved through legal fiction, PR image, and generational mythology in one clean motion. Barron sat frozen. The fury from earlier had nowhere to go. The outbursts, the insults, the rage. They couldn't puncture contract law. They couldn't undo a 1997 clause sealed in boardroom ink. And Jasmine knew it. She simply held the binder in her hand like a gravestone carved long before today, waiting only for this very moment to be read aloud. And now it had been. If you're still reeling from this, you need to hit that subscribe button now, because the story only gets wilder. The room had barely begun to process Jasmine's brutal blow from the inheritance clause when a soft rustle signaled movement. The chairman called Eric Trump to the floor. No bravado, no entourage, just Eric walking in like a man who knew there was no shield left to hide behind. His suit was pressed, but his face was pale, his eyes avoiding his half-brother. He moved to the witness chair slowly, not like someone reluctant to speak, but like someone tired of pretending not to know. When the lead counsel asked him to state his relevance, Eric's voice was even but subdued. "I'm Eric Frederick Trump, Vice President of the Trump Organization. I've been asked whether I've ever heard anything from my father that contradicts the public narrative about Barron." That pause, that catch on the name. It wasn't a slip. It was a fracture. He stared straight ahead, his voice quiet but sharp like a thread being pulled from the hem of a flag. "I once heard my father say, 'That kid, he's a media legacy, not blood.'" The quote stood on its own, cold and clinical, like a scalpel slicing through 20 years of mythology. It wasn't speculation. It was an admission uttered not by a whistleblower, but by the very man who had orchestrated the legacy Barron now clung to. The chamber didn't erupt. There was no chaos, no audible gasp, just stillness, as if even oxygen had decided to pause. Every person in that room felt it. The gravity, the implication, the shift from doubt to certainty. Jasmine remained still, her expression unreadable. Her silence said everything she hadn't needed this moment to win. This moment had come to her slowly, inevitably, and with the cold clarity only truth can bring. And that was when it happened. The eruption not from Eric, but from Barron's legal team. His attorney jumped to his feet, face red, veins protruding at the temples, hands slamming down onto the wooden desk. "This is slander. This is manipulated hearsay. Inadmissible and irrelevant," he barked, voice rising in sheer desperation. "There's no record, no corroboration. He's just making it up to curry favor with the circus." But even before the second sentence landed, the chairman reached for the override, calmly pressing the mute button on the attorney's microphone. The sound vanished mid-yell, leaving only the spectacle of a man mouthing fury into a silent room. The lawyer tried again, gesturing, pointing, demanding attention. But it was too late. No one was listening. The lie had reached its final breath. Not because someone had shouted over it, but because someone inside the dynasty had quietly, simply let it go. The fallout from Eric Trump's testimony hadn't even settled when Jasmine Crockett turned the page, literally and metaphorically. The momentum was no longer a swell. It had become a landslide. But Jasmine didn't rush. She let the silence drag, let it press down on every shoulder in the room like an invisible weight. Then she held up a sealed letter, printed on heavyweight government paper, stamped in red ink bearing the coat of arms of Slovenia. "This communication," Jasmine began, her voice calm but cutting, "was received through official diplomatic channels 2 days ago and verified through the United States Department of State. It comes directly from the Slovenian Ministry of the Interior." She opened the folder and read slowly, letting the words grind their way into the record. "The birth certificate of Boris Miroslav Delino still exists. It has not been revoked. It has not been altered. It remains valid in our National Civil Registry." She looked up. "Let the record reflect this identity has never ceased to exist." The weight of that single sentence hit like a hammer because everything that came before could have been explained away. But this wasn't theory. This was status. Jasmine continued her cadence steady but electric. "Furthermore, the Slovenian authorities confirmed there has been no request formal or informal by the United States government to annul, correct or override this birth certificate. No agency, no representative, no embassy, no consulate." She closed the file and set it gently on the table. Boris Delino, by their law, is still a citizen of Slovenia. It didn't matter how much Barron Trump tried to hold his composure. This wasn't about posture anymore. This was about legal status, about international recognition. And suddenly, what was once a blurry accusation, had become a crystal-clear violation. A human being with 2 existing active civil identities, both tied to 2 different nations, both legally alive on paper and both wrapped around a single man sitting in that room. And international law had a name for that: fraudulent duplication of identity. Jasmine turned slightly toward the committee again, her eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in precision. "We're not discussing a bureaucratic oversight. We're not even debating parental lineage anymore. This is now a matter of cross-border identity conflict, a violation of the Geneva Biometric Integrity Accord, and a potential Interpol red flag offense. It cannot be dismissed. It cannot be downplayed, and it cannot be ignored. If Baron Trump was also Boris Delino and both names legally existed right now in two sovereign systems, then the very foundation of his citizenship, his business holdings, and his legal authority as a U.S. national were under threat. Not because Jasmine Crockett said so, but because Slovenia hadn't forgotten him. The committee then proceeded with the final vote. 8 members sat with their hands folded, jaws clenched. The chairman announced, "The committee hereby rules that Mr. Baron Trump does not possess the legal qualifications to inherit or represent the legacy estate or corporate structure of Donald John Trump. Inheritance rights suspended pending judicial confirmation. The succession ends here." Baron sat frozen. His suit, once perfectly tailored and confident, now looked heavy on his shoulders, like it belonged to someone else. His fingers tapped once on the wood of the desk in front of him, then stopped. Cameras had begun clicking again, slow, respectful, unsure whether this moment called for documentation or silence. One reporter whispered to another, "Is he going to say anything?" But the answer was already written on his face. Baron Trump said nothing. Not to the cameras, not to the committee, not to the lawyers who tried to make eye contact. His mouth remained still, his lips pressed together, not defiant, not grieving, just quiet. For a boy who had once been called the future of the empire, silence was now his inheritance. He didn't reach for a rebuttal. He didn't ask for the floor. He simply stood up slowly, heavily, and began to gather his notes, though it was clear he wouldn't be needing them again. Each motion was rehearsed robotic, like a soldier disarmed after surrender. The press pool was waiting just outside the chamber, ready to swarm him with microphone sound bites and narrative traps. But as he pushed open the door, stepping into the corridor that had been lined with opportunity just days before, he didn't even glance at them. They called out his name twice, then a third time louder. "Mr. Trump, do you accept the vote? Is the inheritance really over? Do you blame your mother?" But he walked straight past them, expression blank, never once breaking stride. For a moment, the swarm parted, not because they were told to, but because even the press sensed this wasn't the time to chase. Back in the chamber, Jasmine remained seated. Her hands rested calmly on the table, her expression unreadable, not gloating, not vindicated, just still. The kind of stillness you only find after fire. She didn't look at Baron as he exited. She didn't have to. Her job hadn't been to shame him. Her job had been to reveal the truth. And now that truth had been voted into the record. She knew her task was complete. Not finished, but complete. The vote wasn't justice, not yet, but it was the door that justice had to walk through. The chairman turned toward her. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said, "we thank you for your diligence." She nodded once, not as a gesture of pride, but acknowledgement. This wasn't a win. It was a reckoning. Outside, the air was still thick with heat and humidity. The building loomed like a monument to both power and its undoing. Somewhere deep in the nation's machinery, papers were already being filed, corporate registries updated, legal titles amended, and in the center of it all, one truth echoed louder than any press conference. A name, no matter how powerful, cannot rewrite blood. An inheritance, true inheritance, is not what is passed down in wealth, but what is passed down in truth. That day, Baron Trump didn't lose everything. He simply faced it. The chamber hadn't moved. The vote was cast. The doors had opened, and Baron Trump had walked out, leaving behind not just a name, but the illusion that had once protected it. What remained was stillness, not triumph, not mourning, just the weight of a truth that refused to be buried. If you're still processing this bombshell, hit that like button and share this video. The world needs to know. But this was never just about a hearing. It was about the brutal, undeniable fragility of power when confronted with raw, unvarnished truth. Baron Trump, and the entire empire he represented, committed the classic error of underestimating their opponent, of believing their own hype, and they paid the price in real time, on a stage where the world was watching. This moment won't just define Barron's future, it will redefine the rules of engagement in Washington and beyond, sending a chilling message to anyone who thinks they can build a kingdom on a foundation of lies. This wasn't about bringing down a young man, it was about unmasking the systemic deception, the carefully orchestrated machine that tried to build him into something he never was, a symbol, a pawn, a crown prince of a crumbling dynasty. It was about how legacy, when built on secrecy and falsehood, can become a gilded prison, trapping not just the deceivers, but those caught in their web. Barron didn't forge the deception, but he carried it. He wore the name, lived the life, followed the script. And maybe that's the most painful truth of all, that even the privileged can be victims when truth is buried deep enough, when their very identity is a fabrication. Jasmine Crockett didn't come for revenge. She came for reckoning. And she didn't do it with cruelty, with theatrics, or with personal attacks. She did it with evidence. Calm, steady, relentless. Because the truth doesn't need theatrics to shake a nation. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it without flinching, to lay out the facts, one by brutal one. For every story like Barron's, there are thousands more that never make it to a hearing room. Stories erased by money, by shame, by history, rewritten behind closed doors, their true origins buried under layers of convenience and power. But this time, one of those stories made it through. And it didn't just change the inheritance of one family. It challenged the very way this country measures worth, forcing a brutal question, because if you strip away the surname, the branding, the wealth, who are you really, and who gets to decide? This was a decision point, a test of whether America still has the courage to believe in its own founding principle, that all people are created equal and truth is not optional. Because the truth is not partisan. It is not polite. It is not comfortable. It is a blade that cuts both ways, and it should. In a time where misinformation spreads faster than facts, where image replaces substance, and where dynasties try to rewrite history in their own favor, moments like this remind us what justice really looks like. It looks like a black congresswoman standing her ground. It looks like a sealed envelope opened without drama. It looks like silence falling over a room that no longer has any defense left. And it looks like a name being stripped, not out of vengeance, but out of moral necessity. What Jasmine did that day wasn't just dismantling a lie. She offered a new standard, a model, a human truth that no matter how powerful you are, no matter how protected your legacy, no matter how much wealth surrounds your name, if it's built on a foundation of silence and falsehood, it will eventually collapse. Not because someone is out to get you, but because someone is out to free the truth. And that is the real inheritance America deserves. Not wealth passed down, but courage passed forward. Not names elevated, but truths revealed. There's a deeper irony here, too. Barron Trump, stripped of his legal identity, may for the first time become fully human in the eyes of the world. No longer a symbol, no longer a pawn, no longer a crown prince of a crumbling dynasty, just a man standing outside a room full of people who finally saw the truth not about him, but about the machine that built him. And maybe that's what makes this story so haunting. That in the end, the greatest freedom offered wasn't justice. It was clarity. It was the chance to start over unbranded. If you found this analysis powerful, hit that like button and share it with everyone you know. Let's keep this conversation going. In the end, what we witnessed today was more than a debate. It was a brutal, undeniable warning. The truth, when spoken with courage, is the most powerful weapon of all. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win a case, she excavated something far older and more dangerous than any headline, the quiet generational decision to swap reality for image, to prioritize branding over biology. She reminded us that truth, no matter how long it's buried, no matter how many layers of wealth and power try to conceal it, has a way of digging its way out. And sometimes, truth is the only thing that truly deserves to inherit this country. The story would never trend on social media, the headlines wouldn't scream her name, because this wasn't the kind of story that made the evening news. It was the kind that made history quietly, etching itself into the very fabric of accountability. Barron had already left the room by then, alone, not escorted, not surrounded. No longer a symbol, no longer a mystery, just a young man walking down a corridor that had once been built for his coronation, now echoing with the sound of his own footsteps. His silence said more than any press conference ever could. For too long, institutions had been engineered to protect names, not truths. And Jasmine had cracked that shield not by screaming, not by accusing, but by showing the math, showing the DNA, showing the signatures, one fact at a time until the illusion fell apart under its own weight. What happened in that room would be carried like a secret tattoo by everyone who witnessed it. A name does not create legacy. Truth, no matter how long buried, will find a way out. And sometimes it is the only thing worthy of inheriting this country. But what did you think? Did Baron Trump deserve this brutal unmasking? Was justice served, or was this a step too far? Let us know your raw, unfiltered opinion in the comments below. Your voice matters in this conversation. And if you want to keep seeing the powerful confronted, if you want to stay ahead of the next bombshell, then subscribe to this channel and activate those notifications. The next implosion could explode at any moment. Don't miss it.